Well, thank you all so much for being with us today. Appreciate you giving up part of your beautiful Sunday afternoon to join us for this conversation. We are going to open it up to questions, and so if you have anything you want to talk about, we'd love to do that. And if you have anything you want to say at any point, feel free to jump in. This is about as informal as you can get. It's a very real treat for me to have Tony Simmons here today, who you all know from his work as the most popular columnist in the News Herald and one of the best reporters we have in this area. And he's a fantastic writer, and I just am so grateful to have him and to be able to talk about writing and his new project and his previous projects and all kind of things. Well, thank you so much for being here. I also want to thank Dawn in the back there for all her help. I certainly appreciate it. We had the 40s night lunch party Friday night at City Arts Co-op, and it was great. We had a really good time, but it was a lot of work, of course. And then to get here and set up and have this again today, Dawn is just a trooper, and I'm so, so grateful. I also want to say that a couple of local artists have their work on display here. The first one, From the Big Goodbye, was created by Jennifer Bonaventura, and she's a very talented local artist who actually teaches at the college. And then for The Big Beyond, the new book, Heather Parker did the piece that is displayed here and on the table. So please take a look at those before you leave, and look up those two very talented artists online. So let's jump in. Why don't we start with when's the last time you wrote, and how was it, and what are you working on?
Oh, the last time I wrote was last night about 12:30. Yeah, and I was working on this new project, which is not a new project. It's a project that's been with me since I was 14 years old. It's one of those that you keep going back to, that you know there's an idea there, there's something, some nugget, and you can never quite get it to work. And about every, 10 years or so,
right,
I go back and try again. And right now, I'm pretty happy with where it's going.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Very good. You now, probably like a lot of writers, you have writing for work, mm-hmm. which you're doing, I'm assuming, every single day, mm-hmm. or every work day. How do you balance your writing energy, your doing writing for a living, working as a reporter, columnist, with what you're passionate about, writing fiction, stories, novels, that kind of thing? How do you balance that?
That's a really good question, and I think there's not really a good answer to it. I can't balance it. You go into the job and you have expectations of what you need to get done that day, and to a certain extent, it's formulaic. You have certain questions that you ask, you have certain places that you go, you know how to put a story together to get the information across. It's always the who, what, when, where, why, and how.
And typically do not have a lot of time to do it, right?
Usually on a tight deadline. My deadlines aren't as tight as they used to be, in that I'm working with a weekly section now rather than turning things over every day. But still, you know kind of what's expected, and it can leach the creativity out of it, depending on how much energy you have and time and thoughtfulness and what have you. But you can get the job done. But balancing that out, when you get home and you've worked a full day, and yes, I'm not digging ditches, but my brain is tired.
Right, that's right.
And there's home responsibilities, children, maintenance, dinner, help, cleaning, all these things that you have to do when you go home, right?
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
And then at some point saying, okay, I'm going to try to write now. or just saying, no, I'm going to turn on a movie and zone out, you know, and having to have the discipline to turn off the movie and open the laptop and stick with it.
So at 12:30 last night, when you finally got a little time this weekend to write.
Yeah. Well, I was finishing up at 12:30.
Okay. So when did you start, and how much time did you put in?
Last night, started about 9 p.m. And pretty solidly for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. You know, sitting up in the upstairs room, family either downstairs or in their, you know, in their rooms and whatever they were doing. We recently moved into a new house, and for the first time I really have a space that I can, this is my space, you know. And anybody that walks up there knows this is my space because they can see me all over the place. It's all my books, my record albums and my comic books and my graphic novels and my CDs and, you know, my old G.I. Joe astronaut figure up on the shelf. And you know, this is Tony's place. So I finally have a, rather than just finding a quiet space in the house or going, you know, out on the back porch to get away from everybody,
right?
You know, having a writing space. Tell me about your writing space.
Well, I was going to say, you know, writing is something in one sense you can do anywhere. Mm-hmm. But for me, and I've heard from a lot of writers, having your own space, having a dedicated place that you write in, and I've had that really since I started writing. But when I started writing, seriously, you know, became a writer, novelist, that was the summer of 1994. That's when I, you know, played around with it, or not played, but I tried a long time before that, but that's when everything fell into place and clicked for me. For the first 3 years, I had a space, but it wasn't in my house. I had a space in an extra room in my parents' house, so I'd have to go there to have a space all my own. I had a computer set up in my bedroom at the time, and I was a full-time prison chaplain, so I actually had an office, and I did writing in all 3 places. In '97, when I moved into the house where I live now, was when I got a writing space, and since then, since that time, I've had that, and that is my sanctuary. That's where all my books are. That's where my art is, and having that is just it's irreplaceable to me. And having, for me, not just a place but a time. You know, I have a consistent time. You know, I go every morning, and you know, I have been in the situation like you're talking about where I grab time where I can and do it around a lot of different things, and I still have to do that to a certain extent. But I like being able to get up and in the morning have that, you know, renewed, fresh brain for those morning pages, and do that first before anything else, you know, in that dedicated space.
I can't do anything in the morning.
What time do you get up, Michael?
It depends. If I, you know, in a perfect world where everything's clicking just like I like it, I really like going to bed about 2 and getting up about 8:30 or 9. But, and so I can adjust that either way. So, you know, but that's what I prefer. So
I would prefer sleeping as late as possible. Yeah. No, I get up, get ready for work, go to work, and then, but I've always been, I feel like my creative time has always been late. Even whenever I was working on the Century novel, which you published through your Pottersville Press, all of that was done, you know, between the hours of 11 and, you know, 1:30 or 2 a.m., night after night after night. I think you probably had the experience of getting up early like you do and opening your email and seeing another, oh, he's done another section.
Yeah, exactly. And I love creating, writing at night, especially late at night, really like that. So I guess I like both ends, and so the life stuff you were talking about, I like doing in the middle of the day, you know, and so start with writing and end with writing, or maybe it's, you know, again, what do you define as writing? It may be plotting, it may be thinking, it may be research. Yes, it may be those kind of things, but that's what's required. you know, that mental space, that time of just living with the characters, of, you know, the other night I turned it on and I said, oh my God, I just had the best idea. I had the best insight I've had into this character in a long time. You know, I had the best plot idea for this book, a book that had been written, I mean, obviously it's not out yet, it's a manuscript, but the manuscript had been completed for at least 2 years. And I just had an idea about it because I was about to start editing it again. And so I love that, but you don't get that if you don't have the time, space to think, to sit with, to be with.
Yeah.
They
well,
say
you
that,
sit there with your headphones on listening to some music or something and somebody walks up, what are you doing? I'm working.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say that Jack Warner used to burst into the writers' rooms at Warner Brothers, you know, and get to typing, get back to work, you know, and the writers were actually working. They were thinking, they were plotting, they were, you know, it takes that kind of, that is part of writing in the same way research is, in the same way that plunk, plunk, plunk on the keyboard is.
Well, I was going to ask you about research because obviously you've put in a lot of research in these Jimmy Soldier Riley stories, and do you ever, because it's so easy, you've got your computer open, you're maybe doing some online research, and you find that you've spent hours going from one link to the next instead of...
You know, I'm really not bad about that. I know a lot of writers who say they get into the research and forget and have to make themselves stop researching to go and write. Mm-hmm. For me, it's all about the writing, and so I go and research just enough for what I'm working on now, you know, unless I'm not actually working at the moment and I'm reading ahead or just doing general research. But the research is not something that I enjoy a fraction of the actual writing. Hmm. So a lot of times my research is, okay, this is what I need, I got it, I'm back on the, you know, I know people who will do just massive amounts of research, but before they ever sit down to write, you know, I do enough to get started, and then because the way I work, I don't have an outline. I'm following. I feel very confident. I've done this long enough. I like the discovery process, and so in doing it that way, I'll have an idea or something will come up, and I mean I'll continually be surprised by something that happens in the chapter or the scene, and so then that, you know, way leads to way, and so as that's happening, I'll say, you know, what building was in this location, or what was actually going on this day in World War II? That, you know, and so then I'll have to go back to the research for that.
I think that brought up a subject that a lot of people wonder about in the process of writing, which is being surprised. You know, I've had the experience of being on a long drive, and you know, there are people talking around me, and I'm really not paying attention, you know.
Right.
Because I'm thinking about my story, and I can't get past something. There's just something that's not working. And then a day or two later, I'm again in the car, maybe at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I realize, well, he wouldn't do that. You know, and this is what he would do.
Right.
Because the character becomes, in your head at least, a fully functional human being.
With autonomy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're truly, and that is, and I don't know that
and those sorts of people are able to surprise you.
Right, right. And I don't know that I can necessarily explain why it is that way, and what is it about these people, who are very much people to me, what it is about them being truly, you know, fully functioning, with autonomy, doing their own thing, surprising me, as supposedly I'm their creator. I don't even really feel like that too much, you know. I don't know, but yeah, what you're describing, that lightning bolt, experts who talk about inspiration talk about it has to be both kinds of research, the work, the effort, that kind of thing, and then you get up from that and you go get in the car, or you get in the shower, or you've spent days thinking, you know, struggling, and it's not, you know, and then boom, that lightning bolt would not have happened if you hadn't done the struggle, hadn't done the, yeah.
So what do you do immediately?
when
Yeah.
when you
Grab
get the
your
lightning
notebook.
I
bolt.
mean, if you're in a car, I mean, like, wow.
You grab your notebook or you hit your digital recorder and you start talking to yourself.
I totally do that, but I'll tell you this. The kind of lightning bolts I'm describing, you don't forget. It's not, you know, it's not like, sometimes you will have an idea, it's an idea. It's not an inspiration. You'll have, oh, this should be that color, or this should be, you know, or what if, or what I'm talking about is where you've done all that, and when it hits, when it strikes, and again, it wouldn't strike if you hadn't done all the other.
Comes in like a nuclear bomb.
Right. And you don't forget. And it's so, because for me, it's an insight. It's like, okay, I just learned something, and this just happened this past week, because I'm working on the third in the big series. It's called The Big Black Knight. I learned something about Soldier that I never knew, you know, and it was like, okay, well, I'll never forget that, because that's who he is. It's a part of him, you know. But the American work, busy, whatever, does not encourage what we're talking about. It doesn't. It says you push through. If you get in a corner, if you just rally, you just stay there. When in fact, if you would get up and leave it alone and go do something else. I was at a book party a year ago. And we're having a discussion, as you often do in these little circles. I think it was maybe associated with Books Alive, and I was trying to tell somebody about a certain actor in this certain movie, you know, and I was like, and I mean, I knew it when I was going to say it, and then it was just gone. And one of the people in the group said, think about something else. And the moment I did, it came to me, you know, and so it was so-and-so and such and such. And so that the mysterious way in which our minds work and which inspiration and creativity work, there's a lot about it that is mysterious, but it does work in that way. You do the work, you do the research, you do the grunt kind of work, and that's what allows for the lightning bolt in the car, in the shower, in the, you know. Then there's also the discovery of when you're actually writing in the scene. Either someone does something or something happens that is a complete surprise. And I love that.
That's what makes it worthwhile.
So the process is different for everybody, every writer?
I think there's a lot of similarities. A lot of similarities, and then I think there is enough differences that it is very idiosyncratic. And that's, you know, people argue all the time is, can you teach creative writing? I think you can guide and help, and you can give good advice and like, hey, this works for the majority of writers, and this is very helpful. But ultimately, it's in the apprenticeship of reading good writers and studying the craft and then figuring out how to do it yourself. And that's what so many are, because it's so easy to publish your own book these days, that's what people aren't doing. They're not paying the price to figure it out and learn how to be a good writer. It's just too easy to write something and put it out.
I have one friend who prepares note cards about each of the characters that he's going to be writing about, and physically attaches them on clothes hangers to a line that he runs across the wall in front of where he sits to write. And as he's writing then, if he's writing about this character, he'll look up and remind himself, you know, what this person's favorite music is, or you know, they never wear this kind of shoe because, just little things, little idiosyncrasies that make that character real. But because he's got so many different ones, he wants to keep them, that's the way he keeps them plain in his mind, is to make out a card and keep it there so he can refer to it. And then, you know, there are others who, you know, will keep a note file and go back and refer to it, or others who will do very detailed outlines like you used to do for your research papers in your English classes, you know, and others who go completely by the seat of the pants.
Michael, you said you don't use an outline, so you don't know what the ending is going to be until you get into it?
You know, for me, to get started, I've got to know how it begins. I've really got to have some kind of, you know, good understanding of the people, of the characters. And then usually I'll have a few ideas about what's going to happen, how it's going to unfold. and then maybe a vague notion of the ending, or maybe not, you know. And it's, I forget who used the analogy, but, you know, they said it's like driving across country at night with your headlights on. You can only see what's, you know, really close, but you can get all the way to the end of the book that way. I can get to California by driving that way at night, you know, and so that's my
I
approach.
think Virginia Woolf said something like that too. Like she didn't know what was going to happen, you know, it just carried her through.
Yeah, I think in doing that way, I think it's the way what you're describing with the note cards, and of course that's a screenwriter trick. They used to do scenes and they put them on the pegboard and move them around, and other writers will have these notebooks of their characters, their descriptions and their likes, you know, biographies and that kind of thing. Or in plotting, doing the cards like that. To me, that's an engineer's approach to the novel, you know.
Tara McVoy visited my Education Encore class, and she taught the students to do what she called character webs. And she would write all of her characters' names down on this big whiteboard with a circle around them. And then she would draw a line between any character that had an interaction with another character and a word or two to describe what they thought of each other. And then that's what she referred to. So whenever she got to a scene where these two characters were interacting with each other, she already had an idea of how they would act toward each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you really know your characters, then you might get something wrong in terms of, oh, you know, they don't eat so-and-so, or they don't wear this kind of clothes or shoes or whatever. I don't think you'll get the character stuff wrong,
Yeah.
and which is what matters. The copy editor will find if the dude had brown eyes in the beginning of the book and green eyes at the end, you know, hopefully. That's their job. To me, character is all. And so how they respond, what their soul is, that's my job. That's what's important. And not to say the other stuff isn't. For me, that other stuff is like second draft, third draft,
Right.
and working with an editor, copy editor, that's when you find those kind of things. It's just a very different, you're working with two different sides of your brain.
Have you ever had a bolt of lightning after the book was finished?
Yes, but it depends on what you mean by finished, because like I say, I just had one for a book that's been finished for 2 years, but since it's not out, it's not truly finished, right? And since I was about to edit it again. But no, there's something about the process for me that once the book is done, it's done. I mean, that story is told, and it is what it is. It's Stephen King used this analogy, and I think it's very apropos. You're excavating. I mean, to me, the story it already existed. You know, these people already existed. All you're doing is either with a pickaxe or a brush, you're uncovering it. You're chiseling it out of the marble.
Yeah, that's what Michelangelo said. He said, I just remove the marble until the statue that's already there reveals itself.
And that's, to me, that is a mysterious, mystical process that requires a lot of humility. And it's like, okay, I am just one part of what's going on here. You know, that's why to be prideful of, you know, oh, I created this, or I had a part to play. But I also am tapping into something that even if it's not a spiritual realm, it's maybe it's a collective, unconscious kind of thing. Maybe it's just all the works we've read and all the things we've experienced and seen that brought us to this place. Whatever it is, I'm just a one part of the process.
Do you often see somebody that inspires you to create a character like them?
A real life person?
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. I'll see a trait or a mannerism. I'll see a way of like, oh, I love the way she talks, you know, the way he does so-and-so, or the kind of, but I've never like taken someone and said, oh, they would make a great character for this book, I'm going to stick them in it. Mm-hmm. To me, like I said, I mean, first of all, you're excavating people who are already there. But that's the fun part of the process, is the creating, not like borrowing, you know what I'm saying, and just changing a little, you know. But
Oh, I agree, yeah. I was talking with someone here about my century book, and you know, I go back home to my hometown and people come up to me to say, oh, I know who you were writing about for this section. This, I know exactly what you were talking about. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
why don't you tell me that story? You know?
Right, right. That happens all the time, especially with the first novel. And I was live in a small town, and I was a full-time prison chaplain when my novel about a prison chaplain came out. And so I had so many people step up and say, oh, that's so-and-so, or that, you know. And it wasn't, you know. And of course, they want to think they're in it too, you know. They're never the asshole character, you know. They're the hero or whatever. But they know who the asshole is. They're like, oh, that's you know. But it's, when I was working on Power in the Blood, and again, that's like 94, sitting in Lynn Wallace's novel writing workshop.
Right.
One of the other writers, when he was reading about the warden that I had created for this series, for Power in the Blood, he said, oh, you know somebody like that. This is based on. Well, that's the greatest compliment you can get. I created him out of, he was not based on anybody. In fact, I took care that he didn't resemble my warden in any way at the time, you know. So, but for someone to say, oh, I recognize him or her, or you know somebody like that, or in the first person, that's you. You know, that it's that real to them is the greatest compliment you can get, to me.
Mm-hmm.
Brought it to life.
Yeah, in the way an actor does.
Well, do you want to take a break and read part of your new?
We can read. We can. What? Anybody have another question before we transition into?
Mike, do you always write books in series, like 2 or 3 or 4?
I have 2 series going right now, one contemporary and one historical.
Right.
I've written 3 other, I think it's 3 other sort of like standalone books. And yet, they were what I thought would be standalone. And in one sense they are, and yet, for instance, Double Exposure I thought was a completely standalone novel. Burnt Offerings I thought was completely standalone novel. Well, I've got a novel coming out at the end of this year called Separation Anxiety that is, in a way, a sequel to both of those books. Now, I call it a spiritual sequel because, you know, it's not a traditional sequel, but so I guess I do, because even books that I thought were standalones and are in one sense are becoming part of a series in another sense. And then a book like Thunder Beach that I thought would probably be a series so far has not. There's not a second Merrick McKnight. Oh, and Dawn's holding up. Yeah, Carrie's Gift, my first love story novella, that's a standalone. So I mostly do series, but occasionally a standalone. And you do both, right? You do.
No, I've mostly done just standalone pieces, but this current one will, if all goes well, will be the first of a series. Now, each one of my pieces that I have here are, I think, all very completely different. And the other thing I do is I tend to work more in short form, which I think is one reason the novel has been an ongoing struggle for me. You know, even the Century novel is really a collection of separate pieces, bringing all these various characters that interact with each other over the course of each separate story. And then most of what I really have over here are either short stories or collections of short stories. The Gabriel novel was an absolute surprise to me, and it came out of an experiment I did. A friend had started a local website, and had asked me to write for him. And well, I can't do reporting or column writing because that's what I do for the paper. But I said, I'll do something, I'll do fiction or poetry, I'll write you something fresh every day. So for 366 days, 1 year and 1 day, something new every day. And so what I did was a lot of flash fiction, you know, some haikus, but I ran across some ideas that I wanted to continue with, and it sort of became a serial. And by the time, over the course of, you know, I'd have a piece of a story this week, and a week later I might have another piece of that same story. And that turned into the Book of Gabriel, which had to be, you know, you had to get together all those separate pieces and stitch them together.
Right.
But yeah, that was an accidental novel.
That happens. I mean, you start what you think is a short story, turns into a novel. Or you start what you think is a novel, and it turns into a long short story or a novella. You know, it's, especially again, if you're taking the sort of discovery approach that we've been talking about. This weekend is the official release of The Big Beyond. It's the sequel to The Big Goodbye. In this process we were just describing, I wrote a novel that was set in contemporary time a long time ago, probably, I don't know, 6 years or more, and put it away. It sat there for a while, revisited it, put it away, and at a certain point I said, you know what, this is a noir story. This should be in the 40s. And I was taking a screenwriting class at UCLA, and I had to write a short film script in a particular genre. And so I chose film noir, and I wrote the very first Jimmy Riley story, which was In a Spider's Web. And he was born, and then I went back and took the novel that became The Big Goodbye. So you just changed the whole thing, except for the characters and the storyline, into a 1940s noir-ish novel. I did that because of my love for film noir, because of my love for hard-boiled detective genre, with the artists in that genre that I like, you know, Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, Robert Parker, and Dennis Lehane, some of those guys. And so I just enjoyed it so much. And I really, again, I didn't know if that was going to be a series. I felt like it had the potential, and but I wasn't certain when I first wrote it. Even when it first came out, I at that point was beginning to think, oh, this is going to be a nice era to make a series of. And so then I started formulating the ideas for the second book, and the first book ends with some ambiguity. And so I thought, you know, this really sets up nicely a second book. And then the way the trilogy, I've envisioned this as an ongoing series, but the first 3 books form a trilogy, and they're more tightly knit than any books I've ever written, any series. The John Jordan books you can pick up and you can read one, and it doesn't matter what order, even though it's best to read them in order. With these, there's a note in The Big Beyond that says, please read The Big Goodbye first. It's that important. So when the college here, Gulf Coast State College, did a play of The Big Goodbye, that meant I spent 90 days with that book, with Arthur, who's here, who was in it, bringing it to life, going to rehearsal, working on the script. I mean, I heard it night in, day in, night in, night out, every night. A rehearsal, and then when it opened, and I said, this is the time to write the next book, because I was so immersed in the world and the characters. And so that was last November, October, November, December, took a break, you know, for the holidays, and then we did actually put on the play in February. So during that time is when I started writing The Big Beyond, and finished it, you know, shortly after the play closed, sometime in probably April of last year.
Yeah, I got to see what happened to Harry.
You got to, yeah, you got to. That's what I hope, is that people will tune in. This is, I really have just completely fallen in love with Jimmy Riley and with Lauren and with these characters in this time. And as I mentioned, I'm working on the third one now. He's called Soldier because he's missing a limb. People assume in this era that he lost it in the war. They call him Soldier because of that, but also because of the way he carries himself, sort of because of the kind of character, the kind of person he is. And it's ironic because he didn't get to fight in the war. And I would call these probably also in the romance genre, in the classical sense of romantic literature. Jimmy Riley has a great love of his life, and everything is tied up in that and related to that. In the big beyond, I got to bring in a lot of the historical things that were happening here, and one of them was the German U-boats used to be all around this area and actually taking out ships and vessels. And so this is chapter 15 of the book, shortly after a U-boat attack. It looked like the Gulf was on fire, red and orange flames in the rain, black smoke billowing up toward the milk-pale moon, a cargo ship ablaze, floating in a sea of fire. What I didn't know then, what I found out later, was that the 400-foot cargo ship was filled with 10,000 tons of fuel oil. Too heavy to anchor in St. Andrew Bay, the weight of the ship also forced it to venture beyond the 10-fathom curve considered safe from the unseen U-boats under the surface of the Gulf waters. Because German U-boats had put some 500 million tons of Allied shipping on the bottom of the ocean floor, leading to a critical shortage of cargo ships needed to keep the Allied war effort going, the U.S. Maritime Commission chose 16 sites, including Brunswick, Georgia, where this one was built, to quickly construct Liberty ships. Using 16,000 workers, the J.A. Jones Construction Company quickly and steadily built Liberty ships that were capable of hauling 10,000 tons across vast ocean distances. Having had 2 full decks running the length of the vessel and 7 watertight bulkheads rising to the upper deck, the Liberty allowed for 5 cargo holds located forward and aft of the central engine room. In these immense holds, it carried weapons, ammunition, food, tools, hardware, vehicles, and even troops at times. Anything and everything that might be needed for the war effort all around the world. This particular one had been fitted to carry oil. 2 1.5-ton torpedoes struck the port side, one about midship, the other near the stern, and suddenly most of the 35 sailors awoke in hell. "Do you have a boat?" I yelled. No one answered. "Do you have a boat?" I said again. I looked around, scanning the area. In the distance, I could see a small marina and a 40-foot cruiser. "Whose is that?" I asked. "The cruiser, whose is it?" "Not ours," Bunko said. "We're going to borrow it," I said. "Come on, let's go." Neither man moved. "We've got to go out there as soon as possible and help. Let's go now." The 2 men looked at Bunko. She nodded. "You turn them in, and I'll have you killed," she said to me. "Find a phone," I yelled as I ran toward the car. "Call and report it." 10 minutes later, we were in a rickety wooden cruiser heading as fast as we could into a lake of fire. This brought to mind a poetic phrase I'd heard somewhere, though I couldn't remember where or what it was from. Their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. The rain continued to fall, but it had no visible impact on the fire. The Liberty ship, adrift now in ever-expanding concentric flames, circles of flame, blazed before us, spreading its fuel and fire across the surface of the Gulf. The inferno we were entering was so intense, so unimaginably hot, we could only navigate the edges. The falling rain, the whining wind, the undulating sea, even the rolling, echoing thunder would not drown out the screams of the men shrieking in pain as their flesh melted from their bodies. From within the ship came the horrific cries of the damned, tortured souls whose last moments were spent in unmitigated agony of apocalyptic proportions. On deck, sailors caught fire as they ran toward lifeboats, leaping into the lake of fire below before realizing what they were doing. one man was stuck in a porthole, his bottom half on fire, yelling for his mama with unadorned abandon of a small, scared, suffering child. We watched helplessly as the ropes holding a lifeboat burned in two, plunging sailors into the searing sea below. I'll stop there just for time. But with this series, coming across something like that, that actually happened, looking at how what was going on at the time, such as another big part of this is the way Japanese Americans were treated during World War II. I just enjoyed those aspects. I don't enjoy them nearly as much as the characters and what's going on with Jimmy and Lauren and Clip, but to me they add a lot of nice dimension and though it is historical and is set in the 40s, to me it speaks of today. It should be timeless in a way that it should speak to whoever reads it whenever, wherever they happen to be. So, thank you. That's let's talk about your new project and let you read for us.
All right.
I mentioned, I was quick to say yes, you write in a series, because as I was looking at you sent me a synopsis, but you did it in parts. And my question for you is, was that one novel?
That's one.
Okay, all right. I wondered if maybe part 1, part 2, part 3 was actually different books.
No.
Okay, so this is, what you're going to be reading comes from characters, people that you've lived with for 14 years, is that what you said?
Since I was 14.
Oh, since you were 14. Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
34 years.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And you just started working on it a year, 2 years ago? When?
Well, what happened was, the last time I really dove into this story was around 1994, 95. And again, it was Lynn Wallace's fault. I was in one of his novel writing workshops. And I made it all the way through this time, and I thought I had a decent story, had a few people read it, they were very polite, but it was not ready. I was not ready, I think. And one of the problems was, as the synopsis you saw starts out with, is really the story of the main character's mother. The main character isn't even introduced until the second half of the first story. Well, in my original version, I was jumping back and forth from one time period to the other, and people got confused. It was non-linear, and they just weren't able to follow it. So this time through, I'm trying to make it clear. Clarity is number one. But as a result, I'm going to have a two-part story. How this character came into being, and then what happened to him. It's called Giants in the Earth, which is a reference to a Bible verse, but also applies to the creature that he ends up having to deal with. It's a horror story set in South Alabama, Northwest Florida, from the 1980s up until the present day, and folds in. I think my favorite character in it is probably the main character's grandfather, who's his name's Jonathan Maxwell, and he's Creek Indian. He's part of the Upper Creek tribe of the Lower Muskogee. And, but he was raised Southern Baptist. So he has all of the Creek native beliefs and, the heritage that is very important to him. But he's also very devout, very, very conservative man, very, very religious man. And so he's in two worlds. And his struggle is part of his concern is what is this child he's rearing, because this child is in two worlds as well. And so what I thought I would read is, whoops, am I still on? Part of chapter 2, which is called The Prodigal, and is about his daughter's return home to her hometown.
I got the privilege of reading the first 3 chapters. That's all he's given me so far. But it is excellent, and as everything Tony does, so well written. So I'm
well, thank you.
Anxious for him to share it.
I had thought about reading the second part of this chapter, but that's where one of my supernatural creatures is waking up from a bit of ecstasy.
Experience?
Yes, and so may not be the right audience for that. So what we have is Rebecca Maxwell Caliban is coming home, and because she's found out that she's pregnant, and she is trying to figure out what's going on with her, and coming to her father, really, who she actually is kind of afraid to face. The morning sun was just burning off a light ground fog as the Greyhound topped the hill above Junction, Alabama, and started its descent into the town. Junction lay nestled in a wide hollow between rolling hills covered in tall stands of pine and oak, cuddled by the soft curves of the earth and embraced by the fast-moving tannin waters of Big Escambia Creek. Further south, the creek became the Escambia River, and further still, it finally spilled into the Gulf of Mexico near Pensacola, its churning waters turning emerald with the journey. The morning of Rebecca's return, the clear creek and its sandy bottom was invisible below the bridge, hidden by a layer of fog thick as a cumulus cloud. The long hill north and east of town, down which the bus now rolled, looked out over the creek and the surrounding piney woods. From here, the lights from Panther Field could be seen on autumn high school football nights. On summer afternoons, the white sandbars along the creek would fill with sunbathers while swimmers and families in inner tubes braved the cold water. On springtime mornings, butterflies would swarm among honeysuckles growing on the tree line. And children would come to pick the blossoms, gingerly draw out the stamens, and catch drops of nectar on the tips of their tongues. Rebecca held these images in her mind like a shield against the banshee call in her memory, a call resurrected once again when the driver applied his brakes and rode them down the mile-long descent across the concrete bridge and past the sign that marked the town limits, population 2023. The sun was behind the bus, casting long shadows against uneven pavement, shadows that rushed ahead of their movement like black spikes clearing the path. The bus came to a stop, and a hiss of air, a rattle of tired metals, and exhalations of diesel and rubber. Beyond Rebecca's window was a cinder block building painted country blue. Cows and pigs wearing bandanas and clutching tableware danced on its walls beneath a sign that said simply, Cafe. To one side of the sign was a small red, white, and blue insignia of a running dog. In her youth, Rebecca had seen that emblem and imagined riding that dog's back to someplace far away from here. Instead, she had ridden it back home again. The driver threw open the door. "We'll be stopping here for 30 minutes to unload and stretch." 30, he said. He stepped out quickly. Other passengers scurried after him, including the woman who had tried to talk to Rebecca about babies. Rebecca watched them go, but didn't follow. She couldn't yet. She relaxed her legs, put her feet on the floor, then bent double and hugged her knees. She sat up and stared out the window at the half-dozen rusted newspaper boxes under the cafe's awning and felt history washing over her. With Michael here on a Saturday night just before a movie. Here with her folks on a Sunday afternoon, younger, eating greasy fried chicken and discussing the morning sermon. Boarding a bus the week after her mama's funeral, leaving Pa sitting alone and small in his old blue Ford pickup. No, that was wrong. She had driven away with Michael that time. She had taken the bus after Michael's funeral. 3 trucks of similar vintage squatted in the parking lot this morning, 2 Fords and a GMC. No foreign cars here. This was America, damn it. And Confederate battle flags in the windows of all 3 of the trucks proved it if the rifles and shotguns hanging in the window racks did not. One pickup had a bumper sticker that said, "We don't care how you did it up north." Another had a window sticker that pledged allegiance to the NRA. Welcome home, she thought. Rebecca finally rose from her seat when she felt the bump of the side hatch being open and knew the driver would be rooting around in there for her suitcase. She claimed her bag from him, stood in the morning sun, listening to the quiet of Junction, so unlike any town in which she had lived since leaving. She stood by a U.S. highway and could hear no traffic, just the dreamy whisper of water flowing in the nearby creek and the echoing ring of the brass bell on the cafe door. That's enough for now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Again, that's it's a made-up town.
What's the title?
The title of the working title for the story is Giants in the Earth. Again, it's a made-up town based on places we all know. I mean, I think any one of us could imagine driving into Junction, Alabama, and stopping at the cafe with the pigs and cows dancing on the
Right.
wall. And yet, I'm sure there will be people who say,
yeah,
I know where you're talking about.
right.
Yeah.
And that the whole series will Caliban be in the always part of the title of each.
Yes.
How many do you envision?
Well, here's the thing. He's been following me around now for 34 years, and he's always telling me stories. So, you know, I keep coming up with ideas. So I really have no idea. I do know over the years I've written a novella about one of the supporting characters. I've written, you know, 100 pages of another adventure of his. I've outlined what would probably be the last of his adventures. But what got me going back to this was going to a writers' conference. And I'm sitting at the conference, and the conference leaders say, we're going to give you a writing prompt. Everybody get out your paper, you're going to do some writing. And they said, okay, this is probably the most cliched scenario we can give you. It's a dark and stormy night. And your main character, he or she, is in a graveyard, standing over the grave of someone who's very important to them. Go. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is stupid. This is just the dumbest thing. And immediately, the scene starts coming together, and I'm, okay, Tom is my main character, Tom Caliban. He's standing over the grave of Magus. Magus was his teacher. And, okay, he's got why is Magus dead? So that's the mystery. And, you know, the guys doing the conference were like, everybody else was doing a little writing, and I'm just, because the whole thing just was full blown in my head at that point. It was like that bolt of lightning. And if these guys, well, we didn't read, you know, we didn't read what we had written, but these guys,
No, just to see you. I'm sitting here.
you know, I told them I was mad at them because I had come there to, you know, participate and hopefully be inspired, and, you know, but now I had, because before I could write this story, I had to write this story. So I knew I had, you know, I have a few books to go now before I can even write the story.
Get to that point, yeah. Wow.
But you never know where that's going to happen, or where something you've been carrying around with you for a long time is going to suddenly turn into something
Right.
else.
So cool. All right, well, we'll wrap up. Any last question? Anybody want to say anything or ask anything before?
I wanted to bring something up.
Okay.
I mean, because you were talking about me being a columnist for the paper, but you also write a column. Talk to me about how you overcome the need, or possibly the, you know, the blank page, when you're looking at, okay, I have to write a column this week. What am I going to write about? What do you look to? Where do you look to find your inspirations? I know some of it is movies.
Well, and most of mine are, in fact, so that definitely narrows it down.
Mm-hmm.
I used to write a more open-ended column, and I like that because it causes you, and I know you do this, it causes you to have a certain approach to life that you're always observing, looking, and you know if you do that, inspiration is going to come, and especially if you know, hey, this week, in your case, every week, got to have a column, right?
Well, then you also have people who will say, I'm not going to talk about that around Tony because it'll end up in print. Yeah.
Right, right. So-
you have to have a no column zone. We're all friends here. Whatever happens here stays here. It doesn't go, into print. But
In my case, I mean, I can be, and often am, I feel like an evangelist for good movies, but more often than not, it is something that has inspired me, and I want to think about on the page, want to talk about, want to share. So it may or may not be a good movie, or what I'm talking about, thinking about, may have little to do with the movie's merits, but something in particular I found inspiring and wanted to share.
I think that part of that whole concept of what you were talking about is being open, making yourself available to find the inspiration, having your eyes open and your ears open, and looking deeper than just the surface of what is around you. It is a way. I mean, it's a way of living. It's an approach to the world and the people that are around you, and not just to see blank faces or the traffic going by, but the story behind it.
It is the awakened life, and I've got a collection of these columns we're talking about called The Meaning of Life in Movies, but then also have a book called Meaning Every Moment, and it is about being awake, being fully alive. People came to the Buddha at the end of his life, and they're like, what are you? Are you a god? He said, no. And they said, well, are you an angel or a prophet? And he's like, no. Well, I said, what are you? And he said simply, I'm a man who woke up. And that's what we're talking about. To me, the writing life is the best kind of life. It's the spiritual life. It is the awakened life that doesn't, the worst thing we can do, and yet we so often do it, is put our lives on autopilot. You know how to drive home today. Mm-hmm. You can do it with...
Oh, and how many of us have driven all the way home and then not even realized we passed some place that we were just gone. We weren't even conscious of it. Yeah.
And how many times are we having a conversation with someone and we're not really listening? We're not really present. We are thinking about something else, or thinking about what we're going to say next, or So it is. I like doing the column. It has been for a while. It was weekly, and that was. But I was doing books and movies, and now it's every other Friday, and so twice a month I get to be inspired by a film and share some aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So.
Excuse me, is the training for being a journalistic writer different from a creative writer for a novel? You don't know what you want to do, and you may want to be a journalist, or you may write novels. Is the training and
It is very different. It is very different, and it's hard to describe in a nutshell. But my degree plan kind of went. I started out in broadcasting, so my AA is in broadcast production, TV production, and radio production. And then my bachelor's is in print journalism. And as part of that program, you not only have your journalism 101, where you're learning the basics and the rules of the game, but you have to learn all these other styles of writing. There's a whole different version for business writing. There's a whole different way of writing for English lit. You have to invert everything you're doing, and it's a way to, because all the approaches are different, you really stretch what you're able to do. I actually turned in a paper in a Shakespeare class, and the teacher handed it back to me the next day, and he said, go back and write this backwards, because you're writing for your journalism class. It's a whole other way. In the English class, of course you're looking at all of your research and you're building to a point, but your thesis statement is what your journalism class is telling you to do. What's the most important thing? Put that in your first sentence, and then everything else is supportive, And you cut from the bottom, so the stuff that's least important is at the end to make it fit the page. But yes, the approach to, I have used journalism techniques and creative writing classes just to get people to think in terms of filling in the blanks, asking the next question, not being satisfied with what they think they know. Go beyond that to, pin it down, be concrete. In a lot of your creative writing classes, it's all ethereal. It's all about the heart, and journalism is very much about the mind. If that makes any sense at all.
Yes. Well, I have a family member who's interested in writing, wondering which direction he's going to go in. He's going to be creative or journalistic.
I think a lot of people who want to be novelists think, okay, I'll get a journalism degree, I'll do journalism, and that'll pay for the bills. And in many ways, it takes you away from what you're wanting to be and do, And with the, Tony's a very good writer, writing, and he does both well. There's a lot of journalism that it is not good writing. It
right.
is, here's the facts, and that's
It's
exactly. And it can blunt your creativity. It can blunt your writing ability, and so you have to be careful.
Yeah.
To me, it's almost better to do something else if you feel like you need to make a living in order to be a poet or a novelist or screenwriter.
That's pretty accurate. Pretty accurate. Now there are a lot of journalists who become nonfiction writers for that reason. They're very good at gathering information and processing it so that it's clear and makes sense, and so they become biographers or historians or what have you.
Or novelist. Who's the white suit guy?
Oh yeah.
What is
Thomas.
Tom Wolfe. We talked about like the engineering approach to the novel. He takes the journalist approach to the novel. Michael Conley, who's considered to be one of the best crime writers in the world, crime novelist, he takes a real journalistic approach to his novels because he was a crime reporter for 10 years or whatever before he started writing fiction.
Tim Dorsey was a reporter and editor. He reported on state politics.
So it's possible to do both, but creativity is not encouraged in the journalistic approach, and the deadlines and it's not conducive for really fine writing and creativity. So,
well, particularly with the problems of economics that have hit newspapers, where you have smaller and smaller staffs having to write about more different topics.
Right.
And so their stories get shorter and shorter.
And that does not include a column.
Right.
As we're more talking about article writing. So, well, again, thank you all so much for being here. We'll be happy to sign books and answer any questions or talk to you.